guys. Welcome to the Impactable podcast. I am happy to be here with Simon from Lacework.
Yeah, so I'm Simon from Lacework. I am our digital marketing director over here. So really have responsibility over paid channels like LinkedIn, Google, Microsoft. And Lacework is a cloud security company that helps IT and security DevOps teams automate their security and their cloud environment so that they can deliver applications faster and more securely.
Pretty nice. And I came from a restaurant background, so I feel like I cheated my way into my current marketing position. What did your kind of career look like? How did you get to, you have a pretty prestigious position at a pretty nice company. What did your career look like to get to this point?
Yeah, I definitely took a non-traditional career path. I actually started in IT, which kind of looking back probably got me to where I am, helped me because I am our persona that we market to. So I understood the channels, I understood the messaging a little bit better than most. I think it's also one of those things where the more you know, the less you feel like you know. So definitely started in IT, pretty basic IT, worked my way up into really evaluating software and tools for our IT organization at a fairly large, what is now a Fortune 100 company. And then kind of pivoted and supported our marketing and communications team and helped build intranet sites, our website, and then started to go into social media and really running it from a brand perspective and really trying to get our brand out there. That company wasn't B2C or B2B type of company. So it was very different metrics, but we were just trying to grow followership. We were just trying to put out hopefully what we thought was good content. It was kind of the early days of LinkedIn and Facebook and all that. It's pivoted over to the startup world after that and started to really do more of the demand gen style marketing and building, taking that kind of brand awareness philosophy and marketing approach and taking it to demand gen was really more of a lead gen focused activity and building that full funnel strategy to get to, pipeline, right? Like that's what we all care about as B2B marketers. And so that's the evolution of my career.
Okay. And when you started getting into the marketing side, what channels did you start with? I feel like for me, I started with Google search, just kind of getting familiar with that. It seemed like a good foundational layer. I was super interested in SEO and then it became, I think it was like Facebook automation. And then I got into LinkedIn. And then obviously I fell in love with LinkedIn and I now run a LinkedIn ads agency. But as I consider myself more of like a full spectrum marketer. Yes, I do run LinkedIn ads agency, but I see the full funnel and I see the different channels and how they fit into it. So yeah, what channels did you kind of lean into at first? And then at what point when you started using LinkedIn and got to that point, at what point was that in the progression that became kind of on your radar as something that you really wanted to kind of crack the code on it and use? And yeah, what did that look like as far as just channel wise for you personally, what you got into? And
so I think Google paid search specifically, and we can talk about Microsoft or Bing search as well. But that was definitely where I started because I think it was where a lot of companies and marketing orgs were actually putting a lot of money. And to me, when I look back on it, it's likely because the attribution was so clean, right?
Yeah.
I think when I started to look at it, though, and it's very competitive and it's very one dimensional in the sense of, hey, you have essentially one ad format and you are building text ads and that's it, right? You're pushing to landing pages and you're trying to convert from there. So it's very one dimensional. But there's a lot, right? A ton of Google searches happen and you're really basing everything off of keyword intent. And that's powerful in its own sense. But I think when you start to peel the onion back a little bit, say, hey, what made somebody make that search in the first place, then that starts to trigger, okay, how did they hear about us, right? Like what are the other channels did they hear about you from to get to that search, whether it's a branded search term or maybe a topic that's close that they were trying to go figure out and get more information on and you want to show up, right? And I think that's the foundation for where I started and from a channel perspective. And then you start to look at, okay, well, what are the other channels that we can influence people on, right? And LinkedIn becomes the next kind of best thing. And for us at Lacework and probably a lot of B2B SaaS companies is we know the accounts and titles that we want to talk to. So understanding reach and quality LinkedIn is the best, right, when it comes to that. And we won't talk about third party
Yeah.
tools like a Clearbit or a MetaMatch or anything like that, but just pure native ad platforms. LinkedIn is the best when it comes to reaching your audience. And so I think the natural progression was, hey, let's build awareness here and thought leadership here and education here. Hopefully it'll influence and rise the tides for all the other channels.
So you did have a really good point about Google and the clear attribution, and I feel like most mature organizations, or it's foundational layer, and then most mature organizations, that's still never going to go away. But there's the point where it's like, yeah, when you understand how the different channels work, like people are searching for this, and that is really cool, because it's like, I mean, on LinkedIn or any other platform where you start cold, it's like you're trying to get in front of people who haven't expressed any need, aren't actively searching. There's no real indicator unless you're like porting, an ABM, or I guess even then, like a list that had some intent. You're getting in front of people who are likely to have a need on a cold LinkedIn campaign, but they haven't actually expressed anything. So that sales cycle might be longer, because you then have to pique their interest and then probably educate them and then build trust and whatnot. With Google, you're right. The demand has been created somewhere. It's on their radar. They take to Google. At that point, they're already like mid or bottom of the funnel. They're either searching for a solution or they're actively vetting like different vendors. So the sales cycle on those is shorter, but it's way more competitive. And it's not completely scalable, because there's only a finite amount of demand that currently exists without having to say, okay, how do we create more of that? And one of the big things that has stuck with me, that I don't agree with everything that Chris from Refine Lab says. There's a lot of amazing stuff but we don't agree with everything. One of the things he said, though, that has stuck with me for a really long time is, whoever creates that demand before they get to Google, when you're then listed alongside everyone else, if you were the one that piqued their interest, that let them know there was a solution, you have a huge unfair advantage when it then comes to Google and they're looking for you. So yeah, there's not enough people, I think, that even view those two sides of the equation as like interconnected. It's, I have my Google silo, and hey, I would love to get some conversions from LinkedIn, and let's fire that up. But they view it as this like siloed thing that they have to cold and then retarget and convert. And it's like, they don't want it to touch their other traffic, because then, God forbid, we can't figure out where the conversion came from.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have more conversions that I know where they came from I'd rather have less conversions and know where they came from, is the mindset of a lot of orgs, versus more conversions, but I'm confused where they came from, or it's unclear. Like, they'd literally rather have their priority is not more conversions and more revenue. Their priority is more attributable conversions, which really handicaps them. Have you seen that in the organizations you work with or around?
Yeah. I think it's a everlasting battle in the marketing world, is just like pure sourced attribution. And you can go, direct source, you can do multi-touch or influenced attribution, right? I think at the end of the day, something that I learned recently was that it does matter, like looking at it from a programs or channel specific attribution perspective. But if your entire marketing org is not hitting the kind of high level goal, then none of it really matters, right? I mean, it doesn't, because then you can say, hey, like these channels are performing better than others, dial up or dial down, right? From a resources or budget perspective. But I think it's also a little bit difficult, because you're looking at every channel as a conversion channel, right? Yeah. And each channel or program may not be affecting conversions in that way, right? From a source perspective. Like, let's talk about brand awareness for an example, right? Brand and creative teams, they're running a ton of stuff that it's super top of the funnel. You're just trying to bring people to the website, or you're just trying to get in front of people, and they're not going to convert, right? Or directly attributable conversions are not going to happen from that channel. But if you stop running some of those programs, hey, your bottom funnel is going to get a little smaller, a little drier, right? A little less warm. And so how do you define what success is for each one of those channels? I think that's a really hard thing for organizations to go figure out, because it's easy to say, hey, paid search, consistently has been creating this many conversions. And when you really dig into that channel, well, it's like all these people that are searching for your brand term, they know about you. And those are the best conversions that are converting to book meetings and pipeline. And how, other channels are influencing those searches. So it's not perfect science, and it's not very clear. But I do think that that's what a lot of organizations run into is an attribution dilemma on what channel performance looks
And
like and program performance.
how have you been solving that? Because this is one question that seems to be coming up, and people are asking us that, and it seems really interesting. So you're having to justify, and I'm assuming the spend in the channel, and yeah, I like looking at it as the macro and saying you're right. If we have all these different channels, and here's the overall result, so we must be either doing something right or wrong. Now, of course, if you want to improve that, the breakdown of like, okay, if I tweak this channel or this channel, the overall result,
Yeah.
I'm less concerned with like, I mean, I want to get channel attribution and channel success like at each level, but you're right. Some are supposed to be converting, some are supposed to be creating, and you can't judge them the same. But if we tweak them properly, then the overall result should get better. How do you, but still most marketing leaders are having to justify channel spend or channel increases. And it's really hard, I imagine, to get channel increases for what you believe is a creation channel, like maybe LinkedIn, when leadership a lot of time is saying, okay, well, Google paid is getting like this, and this is the clear ROI from here. Like, how can we like justify that? So how are you solving that internally for attribution? Do you use software or a mix, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, so we have a pretty, I would say, robust attribution system, and it's not perfect though. I mean, the way that I see it, it's never going to be perfect. I think adding something like self-reported attribution is really helpful. We personally don't do that yet. Still pushing for that, but I think it's one of those things that really helps marketing orgs understand actual attribution, like actual where did you hear about us, and that's the influence. And CRMs and attribution software just doesn't capture that perfectly, right? Because we know that everyone has a pretty messy journey when it comes to discovering you, and the things that are lasting from an impressions perspective about them is not directly trackable. So that's one thing. But for my perspective, I really look at direct source attribution as my like first thing. Like, what are the things that I can confidently say came from this channel? Then we look at something called influenced, right? Influence is a little murkier, but when I look at our sales cycle and I look at our marketing touches, sometimes there's 50 touches on an account before they convert, right? And that's crazy. So how and from a multi-touch, like how do you weight each one of those? Is it first or last touch attribution? And the reality is it's all of it, right? And that's really hard to do when you're running 1,000 programs, right? There's field marketing, there's digital, there's all these other things. It's just messy. And so I look at it from, like I said, the two main things for me is just, hey, what did I directly source? I know for sure it came from this channel and these programs. And then influenced, right? What did we touch? And that's a little murky too, because the way that we look at it is really, did you fill out a form? Right? So, and there's a lot of things that we do, I think, really well on, like, for instance, on LinkedIn. We get in front of our audience really well with all different types of content, and those touches don't go counted for. I think platforms and tools like Hockey Stack and a Dream Data, and other kind of established players that are kind of breaking into that attribution 2.0 space, that's going to be really important. And I still don't know that it's going to be perfect, but I think it's just right. If you're a data-driven marketer, any additional data points are going to help. But that's how I kind of see how that all plays out.
I almost view, you said it about IT, I think, I almost view attribution the same way. It's like the more you learn, almost the less you know. Or it's like, because I've had some of the most expensive like attribution software out there, and I've seen the crazy journey. And at some point, like, you get more, it's not that you get more questions and answers, but I almost feel like once you unpeel the onion, you see like, the 50, 100 touches over 6, 7, 8 months, like, you then just kind of even more cement in your mind that it's not about these individual channels and these individual funnels. It's about the marketing. I really love this. I'm pretty sure I'm the one coining this term, marketing ecosystem. But I love the idea that it's like none of them are by themselves. And honestly, like the idea that you could improve the ROI of Google Ads by fleshing out a LinkedIn retargeting framework, like, is, I think, mind-blowing to people. But the idea that attribution, like, the more I look at it, the more it's like, well, it's really, they first started here, a LinkedIn post, and then they had like, a bunch of impressions from LinkedIn ads. They had a Google search here. They had a Facebook or programmatic or something retargeting here. They signed up for our newsletter. It's like all these touches. And like, the only thing I know for sure is that there's no one channel that's like
Right.
utterly important, and that it's the system in itself. And then it turns into like, okay, do I need to turn this one up a little? And not just I turn this channel up so I can get more conversions of this channel, but turning this channel up might actually help the ROI of these channels. And so then it
Right.
like, yeah, really
And
becomes
but it's
like,
not clear too. It's not like
yeah,
a perfect linear relationship to each one. And it's just,
yeah,
it's kind of testing, right? Like it's just understanding what you throw out there, what sticks, and what kind of lifts the tides. I think an interesting platform for us that we're running recently is Reddit, right? Reddit is typically a pretty what's the right word? Adverse
yeah.
community. I'm on Reddit, right? I don't love ads. Who does? But I think the key to some of that, and we haven't perfected it at all. Like it's just a
I already
throwaway.
like you better right now, but keep
Yeah.
going.
But what we really try to do is we try to push educational content that's really not ads, right? Like we push our
Yeah.
blog content. We push things that we think are topically interesting from a topics perspective, so that people can actually learn and come to our website and come to a blog and like learn something. I try not to push anything that requires a gate, ebook,
Yeah.
right? We kind of know that those pieces of content don't work well with our specific audience anyways. So we just want to bring them forward on a topic and hopefully earn their trust as a thought leader, as in this space, right? And I think that's how you, from a content strategy perspective, that's how you should do your strategy across any channel. And Reddit's just one of those ones where we're seeing cost per clicks and cost per impression just like really, really efficient.
Yeah.
Now, is anyone converting? No, not that we know is attributable, but we know that we're bringing people to the site, and that's going to help with direct, attribution and hopefully organic attribution. But yeah, I think there's a lot of places where people hang out and to go learn things, and you just have to approach each channel and hopefully the right way and just test.
Yeah, I think Reddit is an interesting one. Another one that I think I experimented just a little bit with Reddit, and I experimented a little bit with Quora, and I thought it was along the same ideas. Like people go to those platforms, it's different than other platforms, but they kind of work in a similar way where people are usually looking for like raw, real advice,
Yeah,
not like
unbiased.
the fluffy stuff. Yeah, and they like harsh opinions. They want to cut through the BS and get something. And so if you can give them that educational, but obviously I would adjust, my format a little, like you can be a little more raw, abrasive, controversial if you want in those formats, but give them the real like educational content that helps them like make better decisions or uncover like whatever, like that is. And that kind of mentality, I think, is, I mean, even on other platforms like LinkedIn
Right.
ads, I use the educational flow, I think, has been one of our biggest growth levers as far as like creating content that basically I'd say give the whole damn playbook away. Like if I could create a whole like
We can talk
playbook,
about that too.
yeah. That to me, that's one of my like baseline strategies. Like if I could create a whole playbook where it's like, okay, what you actually pay us to do, all the expertise, like I would not be afraid to put it in a book and give it to anyone who cares to read it, because only one of two things will happen. You'll either realize that you don't have the time for this, and you'll realize we are the experts and that you have the budget and you should just have us do it, or you'll realize, hey, yes, this is exactly what I need to do. I don't have the budget. I have the time to try to implement. Go for it. You're not our ideal client anyway. So like that to me like is such an amazing strategy, and it positions you as an expert in your space. And yeah, this seems like it's working well for you guys. Are you doing that on your other channels as well then?
Yeah. Certainly, we're different, but we do have that same philosophy. And let's talk about how I found you guys, right? So I think it's a really good strategy that you guys have implemented, because one of the main draws for me was about, okay, at the time, like, I had no team, I had no support. So I knew of the general strategy and philosophy that I wanted to run. And I was looking for a specific LinkedIn ad agency, not a full service agency, to go do that, right? Because I talked to a bunch of agencies like, yeah, we can do that. But I wanted 100% focus on LinkedIn because I thought it was going to be our best performing channel. And it is, from a digital perspective, it is. But I also wanted to ensure that we had the right agency with the right playbook. And the playbook, let's talk about this for a second. I took your playbook because I remember I was putting together a presentation deck on strategy. And I was like, man, this is like what I have in my head is complicated. I found Impactable and I had already heard about you guys and I was like, here's the playbook. I literally cut and did a screenshot of your retargeting playbook. I was like, this is exactly what I had in my head. It's actually better. And I threw it in my my presentation slide and I didn't have to recreate the wheel, right? Like it was there and it was actually more polished than what I had in my head. So like, this is great. So I was like, oh man, they get it, right? And so it was an easy conversation for me to just understand. Like after I watched a couple videos and of you and the strategy, it's like, yeah, this makes a ton of sense. Let's have a conversation. Went to the website, booked a call, right? Like that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Right. You got my trust. You gave me some educational, like you gave me the playbook, right? So you educated me on something and made my job a little bit easier. And so I was like, this is great. Like, let's have a conversation, right? And it was a good time for me because I was looking for an agency at the time. But there was a time where I wasn't looking for an agency, right?
Yeah.
But I kept you guys in the back of my head. And that's the beauty of building the right type of content to put you guys as a thought leader in the space. And there was also social credibility from other, people that I follow on LinkedIn. And I think it just all was like, okay, like let's have a conversation now. And that's where it all starts when you start building pipeline, right? It's that first book meeting. And how did you guys influence me to get there?
That's always nice to hear how people found us and how that journey started. And especially like, it's nice when the way they found us is also like the way they want to run ads and what the feelings they want to generate for and it kind of cements like, okay, because sometimes people can look at that playbook and you are marketers. And so that playbook, made sense to you or maybe crystallize what was in your mind, but maybe wasn't as fleshed out because this is what we live and breathe. And, you were trying to figure out one of many channels. And in this channel, we've just been spending more time. But then it's like, okay, not just that's how it works. That makes sense. But yeah, the way you actually found us and bought from us is the way it works for, or could be the way it works for a lot of different organizations if they adapt this. So you said LinkedIn is your guys' primary lever right now.
From a digital perspective, yeah.
From digital perspective, what are the other? What do you think your personal marketing superpower is, as far as you think it's because you came from the IT background, and so you think that's probably the biggest thing that helps you? Well, I guess that helps you with audience, but then on the digital side, it is a new set of skills.
Yeah, I don't attribute it to any one thing, and let's be clear, it's a constant learning curve, right? Like
you haven't arrived.
Like I said,
yet.
you just gotta. The more you dig in, the more you realize you just don't know. All right, and that's the beauty of it, right? Especially with ever changing ad platforms and algorithms and formats and all that good stuff, right? There's a lot of levers, which is the beauty of this role and the pain of this role too, because there's so many levers you can pull. But what I attribute it to, and I think, having an IT background does help a bit. But I think when you just peel it back and you just look at how would I like to be marketed to, it's as simple as that. It makes things very easy, right? And I think a lot of organizations, it's hard because there's this old, we'll call it old, but a standard way of doing sales and follow up. And what I don't want, and what I've just talked to my peers about is, hey, if you put out a piece of content, you get it, and you fill it out, and maybe it sucks, I don't know, maybe it's good, mostly sucks, and 5 minutes later, you get a call, right? Or you get an email and you're like, hey, and the follow-up's probably pretty generic. It's not great. And then you're not ready. And you're just like, I don't like this experience, right? One, I may not even know who you are yet, right? Topically, maybe I was interested in what you're talking about, and I probably haven't even read it. That's the reality. And so I just put myself in those shoes and I just said, I just don't think at a kind of human level, people want to be marketed in that way. And I look at how I go by things, right? You leverage your community, you leverage your network, you look at, you do your own research, and then you go reach out, right? Cold outreach and all that, it does work, but it's a volume play. And it's definitely, in addition to your kind of tactics. But I think that putting out good content and just letting people come to you and build that trust, build that authority. And when they're ready to chat, I think you're more likely to convert them into a customer than not. I think the flip side, though, is that we live and die on a quarter by quarter basis. And that the flip side is not as predictable and it's not as scalable and it takes longer, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the balance that we all have to find in understanding, like, in building strategy.
It kind of sounds like you have a similar advantage that I feel like I have. I came from a non-marketing background, and in a lot of ways, I feel like that's an advantage because I didn't start with a lot of the assumptions that it's like if people come up through a marketing background, it's just like the traditional playbook is the standard, and it would be this huge mental block to kind of say, okay, well, does this make sense? Like even questioning just like the basics, like does running cold lead gen like make sense in every scenario? And does, sicking a salesperson on it, like that was just the playbook. Like people don't question that.
Right,
It's
right.
how can
it's
we
how business was done for, 10, 15 years in marketing, right?
And the things marketers are learning like is more like what kind of assets to like what kind of lead gen forms and what assets and checklists like to be created. Like it was like content. And so yeah, I came with like the same thing. Like I set up my initial campaigns like according to that, and quickly I was like, well, I'm not personally going to like they filled out this lead form like, and I'm personally emailing them and they're not responding to me like every single time. It's like, okay, well, I'm gonna cut that out because that's not like doing anything. Right. Like I was just learning on my own that this stuff didn't make sense like 5 years ago, and I'm like, okay, well, if I'm not going to chase them down, like how do they, how do I want to like be sold to, and how does like a human also. I feel like I'm kind of like an introvert in a sense, in that if I can get people to book calls with me without me or having a team of people chase them down and hassle them, like
right,
that would be pretty beautiful. And my sales team would love it if like calls are coming inbound and those people have already heard of you, they already kind of trust you and know what you're about. They have questions, but they're like, you're not starting from zero. Like, because in the old playbook, like, yeah, they download an asset, they may have never even been to your website. Then you hound them, and it's a person trying to tell them, hey, this is what we do. This is why you can trust us.
Good
this
luck.
Is why you need us. Like, yeah.
Yeah. You better. And I think the follow up to that from a sales side, right? If you have an SDR team and all that, you better do a ton of volume to get very small results, right? And I say small results, but when I say like we look at like content downloads as what we call a tier 3 lead, right? It's or a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 lead. It's not high intent, and we do have a pretty robust MQL score threshold where, hey, if you have just downloaded this piece of content one time, you haven't taken any other actions, we're not going to call you down, right? That's great. But, we have a pretty robust scoring mechanism where you hit this certain threshold in the CRM, then yeah, you're going to warrant someone calling you down based off of activity. And that's better, but it's still not as good as someone reaching out telling you, hey, I want to chat, right? Like that's the gold standard. And the data will tell you that too, because the conversion rates are so much higher to what we call opportunities moving forward after that even initial booked meeting, right? And so I think from an efficiency standpoint, if you don't have a huge SDR team or BDR team, it's going to be tough, right? Because you're calling down 1 million leads potentially. Like if your demand gen team or your digital guy's doing a good job, but what's the actual conversion rate? Like it's probably under 5%. But when you start to build a full funnel strategy and you start to say, hey, I'm trying to get people that are ready from an inbound perspective to say, raise their hand and say, hey, I'm ready to take a meeting, man, your efficiency like skyrockets, right? You don't need as much volume if your conversion rates are that much better. Now it's still hard, don't get me wrong, but I think that's a better approach than the other approach. And I think a lot of what Chris Walker at Refine Labs had talked about, which I align with, and I don't align with everything he says, but when we talk about leads and MQLs, right? The old, hey, finance is pushing this waterfall of goals for you. You got to hit X amount of leads, X amount of MQLs, and there's like standard conversion rates between each stage to book meeting to opportunities, pipeline, revenue, close won, close lost, right? Yeah. That, for me, it makes sense from a finance perspective, but when you look at marketing, if I just care about pipeline and I hit my pipeline numbers, but I don't hit my MQL numbers, no one's coming after me, right? No one's going to give me a hard time. But if you do the reverse and you hit your lead numbers, but you don't hit your pipeline numbers, that's a problem, right? Yeah. But I think, and this just goes back to how are your goals aligned in your organization? And there's a lot of like, you can game leads in a way, right? Like, there's a ton of things you can do. go after the wrong audience, go buy leads, right? Non-qualified leads, all that. There's things you can do to hit those numbers a lot easier than hitting pipeline numbers, because that's qualified leads. And it's just a different, in my opinion, a different tactic to get there. You just need to be incentivized and aligned to the right metrics and goals to better and more efficiently hit those goals. So
yeah, the definition of a lead, I think in some of these organizations, I think that's where, because what is a lead? And you said it. If someone
a lead is someone that filled out a form at the end of the day, right? And that's a lead, but that's not a qualified lead. So that's when we go to MQL, right? Is it the right title? Is it the right account? And all those, we have other metrics too, but those are the main ones. And that's all about targeting at that point, right? And I think the beauty of LinkedIn, I always go back to LinkedIn, it's because we target, right? The targeting is so good, and the quality of the leads is so good because people are pretty 95, I would say 95% of the time have the right correct accounts and titles listed in their LinkedIn profile. When you do Google, someone's searching, you have no idea who they are, right? They could be a student or, someone that's just like trying to break into the space. And, that's not a bad thing, right? Because I think a lot of companies, what they get wrong is that I really want a director title coming through, like they're a decision maker. That's great. But I think multi-threading, breaking into accounts, getting in front of, like first line employees that are just doing basic research so that they can hopefully become your champion down the road, that's worth something. Now, going back to Google, you have no idea who those people are, right? And you're going to bring them to a form and they're going to fill out your form. Depending on how long your form is and what you're requiring of them, you can find out a lot about them, right? And that's where, a lot of conversion rate optimization happens on forms, right? Are you just asking for an email? Are you asking for, their entire life story? I've seen the gambit of things. Most people just hate forms or they want very few forms, or they want to not give you their phone number. That's a big one. Like, why are you asking for someone's phone number if they're just downloading a piece of content? Is that necessary?
And their address.
So, and their address, right? Social security number, bank account information, right? So it just comes back to like, how do you make things, or how do you target appropriately? How do you just give people good content? And it's hard, right? Content's just, it's hard. But I do think that that's like the core philosophy in making a good marketing org. Just like give the people what they want, make it frictionless, give it to them for free, and hopefully you get good inbound, right? And it's not that simple, but I think if you start with that mindset, you might have better efficiencies than the old way of doing things.
And it's not that simple, but honestly, like, when you take that you try to boil it down to a simplistic thought, and then the execution can be more complex, but I think that's a better position than like the overly complex like position some people take, and then they have these isolated funnels. I do have one last question as we're wrapping up here, especially related to LinkedIn. One of the biggest questions or fears that a lot of people we talk to about LinkedIn is LinkedIn has gotten this rep as being too expensive. Was that a fear of yours when you first started getting to LinkedIn? Was it? How would you answer that question? Is LinkedIn? I heard LinkedIn ad is too expensive, and how long did it take you to start seeing tangible results from LinkedIn that gave you confidence to really dig in more?
So I think that's a really good question. I think that there's two parts of it in my mind. The first part is LinkedIn is expensive when you run cold lead gen, right? That's just it, and it's cold lead gen in terms of content specifically, like content downloads to a cold audience. That's when it gets really expensive. And depending on what your targeting is, you're going to exhaust your audience. And that's when your CPLs just climb, right? I've been there. I've done it. It doesn't work well. It can work for a little bit, but it's not a long-term tactic, in my opinion. Where LinkedIn is very inexpensive, in my opinion, and this is the beauty of LinkedIn, is you're targeting the right audience, and you just want them to view an ad, or view a video, and it's educational content, right? We're always going to go back to that. It's on a cost per view perspective, it's cheap. It's like 3 cents a view to the right accounts, the right titles. Hey, that's beautiful, right? And that's very inefficient. And then you add in, then you start to retarget, right? use that. Let's say I always use, I'd like to get seven to 10 touches on an account or person before I ask them to do anything like fill out a form on LinkedIn specifically. And so once you do that, right, you warm up your audience and you hopefully give them something good that they want after they've kind of trusted you, then your CPLs become lower. Right now, really depends on your audience size. That's always going to be the biggest thing. If you're targeting like 500 people, yeah, it's probably going to be pretty expensive. But I think then you look at the second part of this, right? Hopefully you're getting booked meetings. If you're not, okay, content downloads, look at that. Look at the quality of the titles and the accounts that are coming through. Does it match up with what your sales team is willing to follow up on, right? And the progression of those. And so I do know that content, even if at the right titles and accounts, yeah, they don't progress very far, right? They're just not ready. And that's what the data shows, under 5% to a booked meeting, and to a customer, a close won, a close loss, less than, I don't know, 0.05% or something like that. So looking down funnel after the phone call, what happens is probably the biggest indication of success and cost per lead. Because when you look at in-platform, you look at across all your leads, cool, I have like Google's at, let's say, 150 CPL and LinkedIn's at 400 CPL. But if that $400 CPL turns into an actual booked meeting opportunity, what's that worth to you? Like, you have to look at the ROI down funnel. You can't look at it just in platform, because that's not going to tell the story that actually impacts your goals. Hopefully your goals are pipeline and revenue. And the things that matters the most to the business, right? Because they don't care about leads at the end of the day. It's just like, it's a nice number, and maybe marketing is doing their job if they hit that lead number, but marketing is really doing their job when they hit the pipeline number. Yeah. So yeah, that's how I look at LinkedIn. And I think you have to look at it from if you're looking at an ROI perspective, cost per lead perspective, you have to look at it in that way.
I think that's fair. And yeah, I tell the people the same. If you're looking at cost per click or cold cost per lead and you're comparing it to other sources, like, of course it's not going to compare. Look down funnel, quality of lead, show up like from lead to call booking, the close rate of those call bookings, and the deal sizes. That's where the biggest differences are. I appreciate your time, sir. If people want to hear more information from you, do you have any channels, places you hang out, anything you want to, where can they find you or learn more if they want to hear your insights?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not super active. I jump on chats here and there where I think it makes sense and it's fun. I can learn something and I can hopefully give some insight to somebody else. Hanging on Reddit. Good luck trying to find me there. But yeah, I'm around. So yeah.
Well, we will post this probably to our YouTube, and I hope that we will probably talk to you soon. It was a really good conversation. I can tell that you're my kind of people. We speak the same kind of language.
Yeah, we definitely do.
I like that. So it was really good talking to you. I appreciate it.
All right, Justin. Yeah, it was great chatting with you as well.
Thank you. You take care.